I'm Austin Craig, Head of Marketing at Mainframe. Welcome to Roadmap Conversations. This is a new series from Mainframe available in video or podcast format, where we take some time to sit down with founders and builders in other projects and discuss what they're doing, why they're doing it, their analysis of the broader landscape, and figuring out where we all go from here. This is such promising technology, we want to know what other people are thinking. These are all recorded as we go for a casual drive. Think comedians in cars getting coffee, but it's blockchainers in cars talking tech. We spoke with a handful of founders and builders when we were in Prague at DevCon 4. This is the first of those interviews with Jesse Leimgruber. Jesse is the co-founder of Bloom. Bloom is building an identity management and verification system on the blockchain. Let's jump right in. Let's get a little bit about you. Jesse, tell me where you are from.
I was born in Orlando, Florida, moved out to California to study at Stanford, and then I stayed out there. I've been living in San Francisco for the last 5 or 6 years now.
5 or 6 years in San Francisco. You were going to Stanford, is that right?
I did. I went to Stanford. I left Stanford midway through to work on my last startup. Built a predictive analytics company, and then about a year and a half ago started Bloom.
So predictive analytics. I know we're not here to talk about your last startup, but I'm curious about it because it kind of factors into what you're doing now, doesn't it?
Oh, directly, yeah. I mean, we built predictive analytics to kind of determine how effective marketing campaigns would be, and it's all just looking at data and deciding if that data is gonna yield a positive result. And Bloom shares a lot of the same sort of themes. And we're looking at people's individual data to determine if they're a fraud risk or a good risk for credit. And so definitely a lot of the same overlapping ideas for sure. Cool.
You're a firm believer in data. I saw that on your LinkedIn profile.
Very firm believer in data. The way the world is going, data is everywhere, and people need to control their data. And we see so many misuses of data, from just Equifax leaking their data. In China, like your political affiliation, which is of course on record, impacts your ability to get credit and even speed through TSA checkpoints based on your political affiliation. And so I think data is extremely powerful. I think data has a lot of the ultimate truths, but it's got to be used properly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think everybody in the blockchain space appreciates that. There is a Lamborghini right behind us that I'm going to try not to hit.
There is a Lamborghini.
A literal Lambo.
He's not joking. There's
right
a real
us.
Lamborghini right there.
For those of you watching right now wondering what's going on, we're stuck in the Holiday Inn parking lot, and I'm trying to figure out how to get out of here.
There are cars everywhere. There's one exit. The one exit is closed.
Yeah, the one exit looks like it requires a Holiday Inn card, which I do not have. All right, I hear you. All right, let's talk about, well, let me hit one more point. You left to work on your last startup.
Yeah.
Was that a totally unprompted decision? You just decided on your own, or was there maybe some encouragement?
Well, it's kind of like the thing to do at Stanford a little bit. And I was living in a dorm with 5 of my roommates. We lived in an apartment on campus. And believe it or not, all of us actually left Stanford.
Really?
Yeah. So one of them is my co-founder now. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, pretty crazy.
Okay, I do want to talk about Bloom. You already mentioned Equifax, and I think you're touching on the problem that Bloom is solving. I'm making some assumptions, so I'm going to let you fill in the details here.
Sounds good.
What is the problem that Bloom is addressing?
Bloom is addressing a couple of problems. One is that the credit system is broken. If you're an immigrant and you move to a new country, your score resets. FICO in the US has 90+% market share. One private company has a black box algorithm that is 90% market share. And then around the world, a lot of countries don't have credit scores. Billions of people are kept out of the financial system just because their governments don't maintain strong documentation. And so in order to solve the credit problem, you have to solve the identity problem. 3 billion people don't have government documentation sufficient enough to open up a bank account. So we're working on first, Bloom ID, which is a global identity solution, and then on top of that, Bloom Score, which is a credit solution built on top of that.
Interesting. So a big part of what you're building involves attestations.
Yes.
Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Attestations, you got it.
Absolutely. Okay, good. Good to hear. I don't want to sound that stupid on camera. So attestations are critical. Tell us about that system. How does that work? Who is attesting to the veracity of information? And should I just go for it? Nope, dang it.
How do we get out?
I don't know. I
All right,
truly
all
don't
right,
know.
This is actually crazy. Maybe we need to flag someone.
Do I need to address somebody at the Holiday Inn?
Yeah, maybe we
all
need
right,
to
all
run
right,
to the
all right.
Valet.
I was hoping to avoid like the actual distraction to the video, but
It
if we're not going anywhere,
it could probably be cut out, right?
yeah, it could also be included for comic relief. Tell me about attestations. Who is going to verify the identities of the people on the Bloom network?
Who is doing it now? Yes, so how attestations work is, there is, traditionally government's been the central source of trust, but the problem is governments aren't always great at being a source of trust, especially across borders, and the world's more global than ever. So we need new ways to identify who individuals are. And we also need ways for users to own that data.
Right.
So how the Bloom app works is you can verify pieces of information such as your name, email, social networks, your bank account, your income, your employment, and it routes to a variety of different providers. It routes to, for example, your bank is an attester to give you back your bank balance, which is stored on your Bloom ID. Your payroll provider is an attester to attest to the fact that you do work for a company.
Okay.
Credit bureaus can attest to things like the authenticity of your identity. So the attesters, broadly speaking, they're data providers, bureaus, banks, financial companies.
So you can have many outside parties verifying the information.
That's right. Yeah, and so how it works is when you connect these sources of information, it goes to people who already have the data, and it's more of a pull than a push. We don't love the concept of sharing information with people that don't need it, but your bank already has your bank balance. Your payroll company, they already have the fact that you work for an employment. So a lot of these attestations are simply receiving data and putting them onto your Bloom ID that you can then own, control, and decide who gets to access it.
Right. So did you run into any bureaucratic barriers as you're building this out? It's not always easy integrating a new system with a legacy system, especially when it's a legislative and bureaucratic system.
Yeah, that's a great point. This is definitely a new era for a lot of people, and there's a lot of legislative challenges here, but there's a lot of rooms to work in. And Bloom, we aim to be a shining example of how to be compliant. The whole premise of our app is to build an identity that works around the world. And so we've been working really closely with some of our existing partners like BMW Financial Services, American Express ME. We're working a lot with big lenders and big groups to actually make a legislative framework that works here. So big company support is definitely going to be a driving force of global adoption here, and we're already getting some of it.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're really fostering that, forging the relationships with the legacy institutions that will make this possible.
Exactly. We spent, American Express is working with us to do a rollout to 17 countries where they have trouble verifying people. A lot of Middle Eastern countries where they actually require people to come in person to meet with them in order to get a loan. Very bad experience. So one of our team members has spent the last 7 weeks out in American Express's Middle East headquarters in Bahrain, helping work through some of these problems and bring them into leapfrog really into the future. And so there's a lot of opportunity really outside the U.S. And in the U.S. too, but there's a lot of opportunity outside the U.S. to work with nations that have strong government support to kind of leapfrog and adapt new technologies. And so we have nothing against the U.S. We love the U.S. and we've got a lot of partners in the U.S., but we're seeing significant traction internationally.
Yeah, I mean, in the U.S. you have legacy institutions that already fulfill a lot of these roles. And even though there may be some bureaucratic log jams that are frustrating at times, the real gains can be found in areas where no infrastructure exists for these things, or very, very little exists.
Exactly. I mean, that's a big theme that, I'm sure you guys are you guys in Mainframe are also pushing forward is, this concept of decentralization really jump-starting, leapfrogging the legacy infrastructure and really achieving mainstream adoption.
Yeah. You much of a fan of Andreas Antonopoulos? I really like that guy.
Yeah, I not 100% of it, but definitely like a lot of what he says. For
he in an interview with Kevin Rose was explaining the promise of blockchain technology, and one thing that Kevin said that a lot of people say when they're first hearing about this is, it sounds like you guys are just kind of reinventing the wheel. A lot of this stuff already exists, and Andreas made the point. For you, it exists for you. You live in San Francisco, Kevin. You have access to whatever you want at the push of a button. For the vast majority of the world, a lot of this stuff is still just a dream.
Yep.
Like, how can you verify that you're the owner of a parcel of land in Afghanistan that's been war-torn for who knows how long, and doesn't have thorough documentation and paperwork trail to verify any of that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really key point here, is that there's, in the U.S., systems and entrepreneurs and businesses develop to support, economic needs, to support people that want loans, that want to open businesses. There's a great ecosystem for it. But around the world, the infrastructure is considerably more nascent. Corrupt governments, governments turn over. A lot of countries, governments turn over every 50 years.
Yeah.
And records are destroyed, information is lost. And so the ability to prove beyond the shadow of a doubt that a piece of information is accurate, it's a very hard challenge. And this isn't just what Bloom's tackling with credit scores. This has implications in the global financial system, the global currency. That's why we see Bitcoin of adoption in a lot of nations. And so we're looking at a lot of solutions beyond just attestations to actually prove this. We're looking at systems to verify individuals that you know in real life. We're looking at systems to bring in all your existing data under one roof. Systems to pay people. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities here, especially in nations outside of America, to really see monumental change.
Right. So, bigger picture, let's talk first about the challenges you see to adoption for Bloom, and then I want to talk about broader adoption for cryptocurrency technologies, blockchain technologies, this decentralized movement we're seeing. It's not going to happen overnight, and there are going to have to be a lot of things that happen.
Yeah.
I'm curious your view on the broad strokes. How are those things going to come about? But let's start with Bloom.
Yeah, in some ways I'm very optimistic, and in some ways I'm pessimistic. I think it's going to take a lot longer than people think, but I think some of the change that we're going to see is going to be a lot bigger than people think. So, with Bloom, we really don't think that blockchain should be a barrier. We think it should be a technology that's behind the scenes. So if you download the Bloom app, you'll never need Ethereum, you'll never need cryptocurrency, you won't need to know anything about blockchain. It's entirely abstracted. Now, it's still being used and it's still completely decentralized, but we use technologies like Whisper protocol, delegated transactions, a lot of different methodology to actually abstract blockchain away so that you can harness all of the power of blockchain without needing to be a technical expert.
Yeah, if you got to explain to your grandmother what ZK snarks are for her to be able to engage with the technology, it's not going to happen.
Exactly. So usability is going to be at the forefront of blockchain getting mainstream adoption, but building decentralized technology is tough. I mean, sometimes a single button that would be an hour or two in traditional world could take our development team, a week or two to architect a decentralized solution. So, speaking more broadly about decentralized in general, this technology is powerful. It's incredibly powerful, but it's going to take a long way to fully decentralize everything.
So what can help? I'm an optimist. I'm a real believer in the promise of blockchain technology. What can accelerate that? I think these are empowering technologies. I'd love to see them go mainstream sooner than later. How do we get there?
Yeah, how do we accelerate the adoption of blockchain? One of the things we've focused on is sponsoring hackathons. The ETH Global Series, we just did a hackathon with Status right before DevCon. Sponsoring hackathons is a really good way to foster developers that are actually interested in this, and we give pretty sizable rewards, on the order of $5,000 to $10,000 per hackathon to the developers that build the most innovative solutions with Bloom and then just in general. And I think there's going to be a lot of development work. We need a lot of development tooling, we need a lot of education, and we just need more infrastructural support right now. And so number one thing right now is education and building developer ecosystems, and it's definitely accelerating recently. It's going quickly, but there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, and there are a lot of different parties kind of vying to be the de facto best provider for those infrastructure services and for the education involved. So that's fantastic. There's this vibrant marketplace of different people trying to fill that niche.
Absolutely, and the decentralization movement goes hand in hand with the open source movement. You don't actually need decentralized technology to be completely open source, but so much of it is. And we're seeing a lot of people make excellent advancements in open sourcing technologies to solve some core core problems. I mean, half our day today was spent talking with like the real actual developers of the underlying technology that powers Bloom. It powers a lot of applications, and it's just so crazy that normally when you look at an open source protocol, it's some distant developer and somewhere that built it, maybe supported by a big enterprise or Google or Microsoft or something like that. But here at DevCon, we're able to see the actual developers really working on this stuff and actually hash out our core problems. It's like the best tech support you could ever get.
Yeah, and is a lot of what Bloom's putting together open source? And
oh yeah, considerable amount. We're open sourcing nearly everything we do, and we've already open sourced a vast majority of our smart contracts and even beyond beyond just Bloom related things that we use to. We open source our Slack moderation bot, for example.
Wow.
We open source a lot of technology that is auxiliary to the core business, but that helps the overall ecosystem.
Right. Do you see much engagement from the community in what you're building? I know at ETH San Francisco a few weeks ago, were you guys directly involved with that, or did people just love you there?
Yeah, we sponsored it,
okay.
And so we had a table and we gave our prize and we talked to a lot of people. But yeah, no, we had 14 projects built on Bloom out of about 100. The only one that had more was Coinbase Wallet, had about 15.
Really?
And so we were not expecting that for sure.
Yeah, I wasn't even there when I heard about that. Everybody was building on Bloom.
Thank you.
So,
yeah, we spent the weeks leading up to it building really robust documentation that could make it easy for developers to get involved in a simple way, kind of almost not quite drop-in code, but simple for them to integrate Bloom.
Well, and that's exactly what you were just saying. Like, so much of this comes down to the tools for developers to use, the necessary education. Very seasoned developers, the most brilliant people in the space, they come up against a problem, what do? They search for the documentation. They search for somebody who's run up against this problem before. It's not all just perfectly memorized.
Exactly. And documentation, anything can do, people can create solutions if they have enough time, but time is limited. Yeah. And documentation, people spend so much time working on the code, I think a lot of times they forget the importance of good documentation. And I think that was one of the barriers just with crypto in general the first couple of years, I guess not the first couple of years, but a couple of years ago, was, there wasn't sufficient documentation. And we've put a lot of work recently into making our docs really robust. Everything matters. We have like a little night mode toggle on our documentation. We spend a lot of time just how to even lay out the information on the page, just so people, when they're spending hours on these docs,
right.
We want people's eyes to feel comfortable. We want people to be able to navigate them easily. And I really, really believe that one of the next waves for crypto adoption is going to be good tooling, good documentation, and good education.
Yeah, I think that's why you can see a project that will build a functional proof of concept prototype in a weekend and then spend the next 3 years building the marketplace version.
That's right. And there's probably more developers working in crypto right now pushing the innovation forward than any other industry. I mean, if you look at the other big hot topics in technology right now, I mean, self-driving cars, AI, what are the biggest topics that come to your mind?
Oh, AI, crypto.
Yeah, like self-driving cars, Uber for blank. These are massive spaces, and I don't think you would see a conference that was sold out, with 3,000 engineers in any of them.
Yeah.
And even in AI or big data or self-driving cars, I don't think you would see that. And there may be more people employed in AI or more people employed in big data, but in my opinion, there are more developers pushing the innovation, pushing the ball forward in crypto than any other niche. Yeah. And regardless of the price or the market or the sentiment, that has not changed. Yeah. There are still more developers pushing the innovation forward in crypto, possibly maybe only second to the internet, 20 years ago.
And an interesting phenomenon I've noticed is you're saying, what are the big technologies right now? Like, one thing that people have talked about a lot is VR, augmented reality. Right. And those are fascinating technologies with huge implications, but one dramatic difference between blockchain technology and VR is blockchain is bottom up. It's decentralized, distributed, it's kind of starting from the fringes and working its way into the institution.
Absolutely.
VR is the exact opposite.
Absolutely.
Facebook bought Oculus for $2 billion and they're doing everything they can to get more and more people using this. And maybe there are more people employed using AI or building VR, but they're owned by Facebook.
Yeah, we're seeing
it.
a grassroots movement that we haven't ever seen before in any technology. I'm young, but certainly in any technology in the last 10 years that I can remember,
Right.
and possibly, like I said, since the internet. The amount of grassroots development. I mean, these people are working really hard at hackathons, funding these tickets themselves often, and just as a passion for the technology and a passion for the space. And that's got to mean something. I mean, these people are not wasting their time.
Yep.
Right, and it's brilliant people. The smartest people are leaving their corporate jobs to work on distributed, decentralized technology. And even if it takes a while, I'm confident there's going to be some absolutely world-changing technologies to come out of this.
Totally, and I think some of the earliest adopters were very ideological, and that continues to be true. Many of the people in the space are just firm believers in its positive potential.
Right.
And I met several people in the registration line, like, oh, who are you here with? I'm Austin. I'm from Mainframe. Who are you here with? Like, I'm not here with anybody. I just came. I just want to be here.
Yeah.
And you're right. That like really speaks to the power of what's going on.
Yeah. So Austin, what are some of the big trends in blockchain you see? What are some of the best places that it could be used for good?
Ooh, the interview just got turned around. I fully agree with what you were saying about empowering people in distant fringes of society who don't have institutional support for many of the things that we take for granted in the Western world and in the U.S. In Europe and in other places. I am somebody who believes that people are generally better off when they are more free to do as they please. So so long as they're not like actively harming, cheating, robbing, stealing from other people. That's going to happen in any environment. You can have as much control over people as you want. You can have a prison, and that's still going to happen.
Yeah.
But if you empower people, I think people are generally good and they're going to do well with that power. So I see this giving people control over their own lives, control over their own interests, control over their own property.
Yeah, giving people control over their own lives, that's such a big point. My talk at DevCon is called The Entire History of You is Being Sold. And, I was actually surprised it got accepted because it's not a technical talk. And the talk is on the fact that thousands, tens of thousands of servers right now are actively mining and pooling your data, your information in credit bureaus inside of social networks selling to advertisers. And your data is worth a lot of money, but other than the money it's worth, it's being used without your permission. And it's not always bad. I'm not claiming that targeted ads are bad or credit bureaus are bad. I'm definitely not claiming that. But I feel like users should own their own data. Users need to be the custodian of their own data. We saw Tim Cook just go on a tweet storm, 20 tweets about how Apple has a new mission to give users the control back of their data. And it's fascinating to see that because, even just 3 years ago, the philosophy of big companies was the exact opposite. It was how can we control and own the data and mine it and sell it. That was in every VC pitch was we're going to sell the data. Yep. And now we're seeing the opposite true. We're going to give users the power to take back their data. And if Bloom can make a little bit of a push forward by open sourcing technology and building a protocol that people can adopt, then it's a whopping success.
Yeah, I think people have historically underappreciated the value of their own information because they've never been afforded the opportunity to be the arbiter or the real controller of that information. If you're going to engage with legacy institutions over the last couple decades, part of the bargain is you have to give up your information.
Yeah.
That's the deal. And they set the terms. You don't have much say.
Yes, they set the terms. There's a coffee shop at a college, I can't remember which one, but it just opened and you actually get a free coffee if you type in your name, your college, your degree, your major, and maybe a couple other pieces of information. And students go in there all day long and they have no problem doing it. Obviously, I wouldn't have a problem doing it either. This information's already out there. It's practically on LinkedIn. But they found a way to sell it for like $1 or $2 when you type it in. And it shows literally that your information is like, it's like a case study in the fact that your simple information is being sold and is valuable, and it's even just typing it in and getting a free coffee, but that's happening thousands of times and you don't even realize it.
Yep. And the cumulative effects are easy to overlook. On a personal note, I didn't fully appreciate how much of my time can be taken by giving away my information.
Yeah.
Like, if I give away my email to lots of people, guess what? My email gets flooded, and it becomes pretty useless if I'm just getting a fountain of spam. So, like, the trade-off of information equals me giving up time. If people had asked me to give up my time, I would have been a lot more reticent. But email address, sure. Guess what? There's an exchange rate there. Like,
absolutely.
The one can equal the other.
Yeah, I mean, there's one resource that everyone has the same amount or nearly the same amount of, and that's time. Billionaires have the same amount of time as as anyone else, and you can't buy more of it. And the fact is that giving up data isn't just giving up our personal information, it is also giving up our time. From spam mail to spam emails to getting pitched on things you don't want. How many cell phone calls do you get that are just random spam numbers?
It's driving me crazy.
I know. I mean, it's like unbelievable at this point. They got to do something about it. I mean, I think it's just, I thought for a while it was just me, but my phone rings every 20 minutes. I can't even take.
It's definitely not just you. It's like epidemic. I used to think that I could be okay by only answering local calls. Right. If it's local, if it's my area code, it's probably somebody I know.
Right.
Not anymore.
Oh,
They're
no,
all
exactly.
bots. They're all robots.
Yep. Every call that's an unknown number is a robot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually being nuts. It's they need like a spam filter or something like that.
Yeah. Didn't think we'd get here, but here we are. And it's a product of the things we're talking about.
A token-curated registry of validated numbers. Blockchain.
Is that your next startup?
HTC just launched a blockchain phone.